Good morning. Welcome to the Fantasy Forecast on Fantasy Football Advice Network. This is the injury special with our very special guest, Marcus Gailie. How you doing, Marcus?
Pretty good, Biggs. How are you?
I'm good. Gailie, man, we've been working together for months, and I got your name wrong.
You're good.
We're here to discuss some injuries that will affect your fantasy football season. It's 5:30 in the morning, and I'm walking my dog, so I'm a little bit unprepared. I don't have a show sheet or anything like that. So, Mike, why don't you go ahead and lead us into what we're doing?
Okay, we'll start with our intro. Let's go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Fantasy Forecast with Grindberg and bigz. And we got special guest Marcus Gailie here for the injury news. We've got 3 different time zone, folks. So that's what we're doing right now for everybody. We got Marcus on the East Coast, me in the Central, and then bigz finally in the Pacific Coast. So like we've got you covered here, and special shout out to bigz for making this happen 5:30 in the morning where he is. So yeah, that's what we do for you all on a Saturday morning, headed in to the first weekend, and we got a lot of news. Marcus, tell everybody where they can find your work, what you do for a living, because that's super important to this injury show. And yeah, let's get it started.
Yeah, so as Biggs and Grindberg said, my name is Marcus. I'm a physical therapist. I'm out in the Pittsburgh area, so Pennsylvania. Yeah, I've been a PT for about 3 years now. Also a former collegiate football player. So, my past life and my current life, what better 2 ways to blend those fields than to do some injury analysis in the fantasy football space. So I've been working with the Undroppables now for a little over a year. That's how I met you two and got to link up with you guys in Canton at the Expo, which was amazing. So I do have a show with the Undroppables right now. It's called Unavailable. It's my own little, similar to this, like an injury segment show, like what we're going to do today. And then also I do help run the Steelers Uncovered show via the Undroppables network as well.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Thanks for coming on, and we should have you on here every week as much as we can to get the injuries for everybody leading into the weekend. So the first one we're going to talk about, and we're going to end it with the Jordan Love, because that's still fresh in our minds, but we're going to let that one incubate a bit here. So we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson listed as questionable for week 1. He aggravated his calf injury in practice, potentially paving the way for Justin Fields to start against the Falcons. You're a Steeler, insider here, Marcus. So this is a, probably one that's got you drooling at the, mouth to kind of figure out and dissect. So calf injuries, he's been dealing with it for most of the training camp from what it sounds like. So how do you assess the impact of this injury, Wilson's fantasy value, and the potential for Justin Fields stepping into this role?
Right. So as you mentioned, he tweaked his calf back at the early stages of camp. I think actually he didn't even practice the first few days because he had calf tightness. This is what they're calling it. They're keeping it very much under wraps. You're not getting a lot out of Steelers practices on what's actually going on. For reference, Van Jefferson, the wide receiver, on I think it was Thursday, he said, he's like, I didn't even know Russ was limited today in practice. So there's not a lot of clarity moving forward. I do think, though, if he's not at 100%, which he does not sound like he is, they will probably lean Justin Fields. I think that's the reason that they acquired someone of his caliber to be a backup, because there's not a huge drop-off between the two. So if you can, put Russ on the shelf for a few weeks, these soft tissue injuries can be a little bit tricky. They can get re-aggravated rather easily if they're not given the proper time to heal. So without further information on what his injury actually is, based on the calf tightness and the fact that he's limited at practice, we'll probably guesstimate that it's somewhat of a calf strain. But there was one report yesterday per Ian Rappaport, who's pretty good, that believes that Russ will not start on Sunday. So if that's the case and you have Justin Fields, I'd throw him in there. We know he may not be the best actual football quarterback, but when he does play, he scores fantasy points. So there you go.
Yeah, Biggs, you got something to add to that? You got any probing questions? Do you have something to add about the quarterback situation there now? What's your initial reaction to that?
It's absolutely something to monitor. And if you are one of the savvy people that drafted Justin Fields as your Russell Wilson handcuff, then be ready to throw him in there as soon as there's a designation from the Steelers team and an announcement. Justin Fields with his rushing upside is he'll be okay for you in fantasy. So be ready to start him if you got him rostered.
So what's your thoughts on if Justin Fields has a really good game here, Biggs? If he does start, do you think that threatens Russell Wilson's role right off the initial, or do you think Wilson, if he's fully healthy, no matter how Fields plays, will be the starter?
That's a great question because it's something that's been debated all offseason, and I've been on the side of Russell Wilson's job is not in jeopardy because of play, but it could be because of injury. We could have a Wally Pipp situation where he has to sit out for a couple weeks. Justin Fields comes in, the Steelers do enough defensively to win, and then it doesn't make any sense to go back to Wilson. But I think Wilson is their money guy, and they're going to ride with him as long as they can. I think it would be a temporary setback if Wilson is able to if Wilson sits out this week and he's able to come back next week. I don't think it's going to affect him very much. But if it's a lingering thing, or if Justin Fields just absolutely wows people in Wilson's absence, I think Justin Fields could steal the job.
Do you have anything to add to that, Marcus, before we move on to the next one? Are you on the same page as that?
Yeah, I think they were leaning Russ off the rip because he basically can be an upgraded version of what Kenny Pickett was asked to do the last 2 years, and that's not turn the ball over. Kenny Pickett was almost doing that to a fault because he wasn't throwing touchdowns either. So it was just a whole lot of nothingness, but the defense was so good and opportunistic that it kept them in games. So I think, they're looking at it as, hey, we got the defense that's pretty good at taking the ball away. So long as we don't turn the ball over, we should be in pretty good shape come the fourth quarter. And, when you're looking at turnover margins, Russ, the proof is there. He takes care of the ball a lot better than Fields has the last 3 years or so since Fields entered the league. So I think that's what gave Russ the edge off the bat. But if he's injured and Fields steps in and they're playing well, I agree with Biggs. It's going to be hard to try to turn back to Russ at that point.
Yeah. Okay, so now the Cincinnati Bengals, they face some critical uncertainties that could impact your lineup. Quarterback Joe Burrow is making his return, but there's some concerns over the availability of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is listed as doubtful due to a hamstring injury. Can you break down the hamstring injury for us? What's the typical recovery timeline for such an injury, and how it might affect his performance if that does manage to not play in week one? Additionally, how do fantasy gamers set their expectations for their lineups with, Chase uncertain and Higgins? Are we really going to be in on, Andre Yosevich and Jermaine Burton at this point?
Yeah, so to talk about Higgins first, they interviewed him. I think I saw that it was on Thursday. He said he felt really good, near 100%. And then the next day he was downgraded in practice. And then it turns out that he's going to be doubtful for the game. He has dealt with hamstring injuries in the past. What's super irritating as a player is they can just nag for weeks almost at a time. So you can feel completely fine, walking, getting up, doing everything, lifting weights. And then the second you go to sprint or break down and get out of a cut, it just grabs you. And, this is not ideal because it seems like this is almost getting worse as the season approaches. And, what you risk of is him trying to get back on the field too soon, re-injuring it, and then this progressing through a full season. I know last year he was a little bit plagued by injury as well. He has hurt the same hamstring before, which makes me think it's a little more of a chronic issue. But, since it's so early, if I were them, I would try to just hold him out as long as possible if he's going to miss game one, really until it is fully healthy. But if not, he scares me a little bit because, these injuries can be tricky. We saw it with Keenan Allen a couple years ago. Pulled his hamstring in week 1. He was out, I think, 8 weeks. Tried to come back, hurt it again 2 weeks later. So really, if you don't give these soft tissue injuries enough time to heal, you're looking at a season-long issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, what's your your first instinct here? Do you think he plays? Are the Bengals going to be safe? I mean, they have a matchup versus the Patriots. That might be a game that they might decide. Especially the situation with Jamar Chase. What are we looking at here? Do you think he plays?
I don't think he plays week 1. The doubtful tag, looking back over the years, I think there's something less than a 25% chance that the player actually plays when they're listed as doubtful on the injury report. So I don't expect to see T. Higgins on Sunday. Jamar Chase, I do think will end up playing. So then you're looking at any combination of him, Yoshivas, Trent Irwin, and maybe Burton. But you've seen all these reports that he's supposedly in the doghouse. But I do like Yoshi this week without Higgins playing.
Yes.
They've been impressed with him in camp. I think last year he proved he can play a little bit. So, I expect him to pick up the majority of, the targets that Higgins would have gotten had he been fully healthy.
So bigz, I got a question for you there. I mean, piggybacking off the Yossi comment there, are you high on him as well? And what's your breakdown on the backfield now if Higgins doesn't play? Do you think that leads to more opportunity for a guy like Chase Brown, who's a pass catching back? What's your initial thought on the breakdown of that Cincinnati offense now that if Bengals wide receiver T Higgins isn't playing?
I don't think it changes the game plan as far as like rush pass ratio. I think they go into the game feeling like they have a solid wide receiver core and they're just going to go business as usual. The real question is how much Jamar Chase is going to play. It's been reported that he's going to be limited just because he hasn't been practicing with the team and everything. That moves Andre Yoshivas up even more. Jermaine Burton has been talked about in Bengals camp as not quite ready yet. So I think we see a little bit more Charlie Jones than we do Jermaine Burton. So Charlie Jones is a guy, especially if you're in a league that counts punt returns, Charlie Jones is a guy that you want to absolutely go out there and grab. The T. Higgins thing is worrying just because it was such a quick doubtful designation. I mean, it was like literally a day that it happened from his press conference where he said that he felt better than he ever has. And having been an athlete dealing with a hamstring issue that lasted an entire summer and then lingered for years later, every time I would get a hit and come out of the box, I would feel it twinge, and then I'd be dealing with it for the whole rest of the game. And that happened for a decade. So sometimes it was manageable, sometimes it wasn't, but it never really fully went away. So if it is a chronic problem for Higgins, it's going to plague him for the rest of his career. So that's not a good thing.
Yeah, fair enough. And so we talk about Jamar Chase. You say he might have a limited role. As fantasy drafters, we drafted him in the first round, no matter what. In my opinion, if he's playing, I have to play him. Like, is there any other options? Are you playing him, or is it, unless you have a stack lineup? What's your feel on that, bigz? Are we starting Jamar Chase no matter what?
I think you kind of have to because, a snap share of 15 or 20 snaps in a game for Jamar Chase is a little bit different than, a full game for other lesser wide receivers. So you kind of have to take the chance that he's at least going to get you a touchdown upside, catch 5 or 6 targets. I mean, he's poised in position to score. It's just, are those opportunities are going to be a little bit more limited than they usually are, but we deal with that. So, you spent the draft capital on him. It's week 1, play him.
Yeah, absolutely. Got anything to add to that, Marcus, before we get into the next one?
No, I agree. I think you got to put him in there. He's proven he's one of the best in the league. So if he's healthy and he is going to be on the field, you got to put him in your lineup.
All right.
We are here. We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today.
That's right. It's your one-stop shop for everything fantasy sports. Okay, now let's get into the last injury that just happened last night, and we don't know much about it, but the Packers kicked off their season with a challenging game in Brazil. They fell short 34-29 against the Eagles. The loss was compounded by an injury to the starting quarterback, Jordan Love. The situation is uncertain given the details of the injury, the fact that Matt LaFleur has been vague about his status. Marcus, what are your initial thoughts on how this might impact his value moving forward and his status headed into week 2?
Yeah, so as a Jordan Love shareholder in quite a few leagues, obviously this is less than ideal. So I'm not going to sit here and try to guess exactly the injury that happened, but I'll give you a few options just based on the video and everything I've been seeing from other injury experts in the space. So by the mechanism of injury, which is the fancy word for how the injury happened, someone kind of landing and a lot of pressure on the outside of his knee, kind of caving it inwards, you're looking at a few possibilities. So the first one was the high ankle sprain. A lot of the weight was down through the lower part of his leg. If that's the case, you're looking at about a solid 4 to 5 weeks, like give or take. Those ones typically take longer to heal than your common like lateral ankle sprain. Just if you were to roll your ankle doing something, these ones are a little more severe. So that would be first case scenario. Next case scenario, what happened to Patrick Mahomes a few years ago, the knee dislocation or subluxation. I know you guys might have seen that zoomed in video. It looked like his kneecap almost kind of shifted or popped. Typically when that occurs, your kneecap will go outwards or towards the outside part of your body and then quickly come back in. If that's the case, if there's minimal damage, you're looking at like a 2 to 4 week absence, which is probably best case scenario, judging by the third potential with this, his mechanism of injury, and that would be an ACL, MCL complete tear. Kind of that pressure on the outside part of the knee, caving it down and inwards is your very standard way to tear your ACL. It can happen either non-contact or with contact. And, if that's the case and he does have a complete ACL and MCL tear, he's going to be out for the rest of the season.
Ooh, and that's worst case scenario. So is there a lot of rumblings of that being like a strong possibility, or it's just too early to know?
That had to plug my mic back in real quick. It is too early to tell. I'm sure they'll be fairly quick about, getting their tests because they're going to have to make some moves as well, I would imagine. He is going to be out for the season. I'm just saying my hunch is that he tore his ACL watching the replay about 100 times. So if you put a gun in my head and made me pick one, that's what I would guess. But there is light at the end of the tunnel that it could be one of the two previously mentioned injuries I was discussing. So I'm hoping for those, but I don't know. It's not looking fantastic.
So bigz, what's your initial thought here? Obviously it's not great news. What do you have any advice for fantasy managers that are dealing with the Jordan Love situation at this stage? What do you got to say to them?
Well, I'm not a professional athlete or a physical therapist, but I have sprained my ankle before, and that's all it is. It's going to be fine. He's just going to tape it up next week, and he'll be out there. But if there is some imaging that comes back and shows structural damage to either of those major leg joints, you're going to want to do something to not only deal with missing Jordan Love for a while, but you're going to want to not carry any of the Packers wide receivers because Malik Willis isn't that dude. So that downgrades Jaden Reed and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and all these guys that we had high expectations for in a perfect world where Jordan Love finishes the season with 17 games played. But there are some nice waiver wire pickups on some of the leagues that I've seen. And the one that I have have Jordan Love as my QB, as one of 3 quarterbacks. Derek Carr's out there on the waiver wire, and I'm prepared as soon as Sleeper lets me to move Jordan Love into the IR spot and grab Derek Carr. If you're going to be picking up somebody on Fab, just remember 30% is about what you're going to want to use, and be prepared because it didn't look good. But we won't know anything. I mean, he's a professional athlete. He deals with flexibility all season long, and the more flexible he is, the easier it is to come back from the injury. If he's somebody who sprained his ankles a bunch of times, what looked worse to me was the ankle. That was my initial thought. It's not until you like really slow the tape down that you start seeing knee buckle. But with an ankle injury, if he's somebody that sprained his ankles a bunch of times before, his recovery could be pretty quick, and the injury could be not that serious. So professional athletes, tape it up, stabilize it, and get out there. It also was on his lead foot, not his plant foot. So if there is nothing wrong with his knee, if it's just his ankle, that's going to be the best case scenario, and he should be okay. But we have to wait and see for the imaging to come back and see if there's any structural damage.
So I'm going to lay a name out there because I know if it is a long-term thing and he is out for the season here, I mean, there is one free agent quarterback that, he's a veteran. Ryan Tannehill's floating around. Is that think maybe an option for the Packers? Do you think they actually go into this season with Malik Willis as their starting quarterback if this is long-term?
I don't know what their plans were with Malik Willis because they had some guys in house that knew the system that they let go. So I would imagine one of them comes back before Ryan Tannehill does. But yeah, don't rule a trade out. Like, if I'm GM of the Packers, I'm calling the Chiefs right now and being like, hey, what's going on with Carson Wentz? And so. Yeah, it's just so the timing of our show versus when the injury happened. There's we're still in a lot of limbo mode, so, so we need to wait to react. But be prepared is the message.
Yeah, awesome. Anything to add to that, Marcus?
No, I mean I think if he's going to miss extended time, I don't know what their answer is going to be at quarterback, and like bigz said, that's really going to hurt any shares you have of any of those receivers or tight ends, because Love is really good at spreading the ball around. He's a good downfield thrower, as you saw last night. So no matter who they can get to replace him if he's out for the season, is not going to be able to do it at the capacity that he was.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, man. Thanks for that. You want to give our viewers another quick snippet of where they could find you and all your stuff, and tell them that you'll be back next week before bigz brings us home.
Yeah, absolutely. So follow me on Twitter at MD Gailie, Galie. I'm part of the Undroppables team, as I mentioned. So if you go to their YouTube page, that's where you'll see my videos of both Unavailable, my injury show, and then also the Steelers Uncovered podcast that I do with another member over there. So that's where I'm at. Find me on Twitter or YouTube, and then I'll be guest appearing here, as Grindberg mentioned, with these boys for more fantasy injury advice for y'all.
Yeah, and look for us at the Raiders Uncovered and the Steelers Uncovered. Oh, I guess that's on the Undroppables, but we're going to be doing a head-to-head show when the Raiders and the Steelers play, and that's going to be fun.
Do you know what week that is?
I don't.
I think I
did on Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay. I'll look it up. But last year it was early. I don't think it's that early in the season again this year.
It's mid-season, like week 8, week 9, something like that.
Okay. All right. Nice.
Well, that's our show, everybody. Thank you for watching the Fantasy Forecast with Grindberg and bigz and Marcus. Stay tuned on Fantasy Football Advice Network for all of our shows in the Fantasy Forecast spectrum. We've got starts and sits coming on Sunday. We have waiver wire pickups. We have injury shows. We're telling you how to build champions. So thanks for liking and subscribing and hitting the bell and following us. Get over to FSAN, start your account, and come talk to us. We'd love to have you, and we hope you win.
Hope you win. Thanks, Marcus. See you next week.